Wayne's World, rising above the noise and confusion.
It's WaynesWord.
Oh.
Welcome to this edition of WaynesWord. We have with us today a very special guest, my friend and Governor Jared Polis of Colorado. Welcome.
I know it's Wayne's Word, but I always think of it as Wayne's World, that old SNL, party on. I thought I was Garth, you were Wayne, let's do this.
You're Garth.
Yes.
Let's just
party on.
Let's play the role. Absolutely. Well, listen, I will begin by noting that Governor Polis and I have maintained a positive dialogue over many, many years. We don't agree on a lot of things. I am sort of an arch conservative and grew up in a liberal household when I was young and have become an arch conservative. Governor Polis is a liberal Democrat by most definitions, although I would say he's considerably more moderate than a lot of the legislature in this state, which has gone way out on the far left ledge. But we've always gotten along, and we like to discuss policy. We like to say what Governor Polis says is let's how do you put
Disagree
it?
better.
Disagree
better, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people sometimes forget, but our country was very much founded on disagreement. Our founding fathers had very profound disagreements with one another, right? But they did it in a constructive way, a way with dialogue. To this day, we have disagreements. It's nothing to be ashamed of or shy away from. My gosh, what a boring world it would be if we all agreed on every topic. There'd be nothing, no discussion. So disagreement is really a key element of a healthy democracy.
Yeah, that, and I think divided government is nice, which we have not had in Colorado for a long time. But that way there is a lot
I'll
answers.
tell you, I'll make you a trade. If you give me divided government in Washington, I'll give you divided government in Colorado. How's that look?
Oh, well, it's been longer since we've had one in Colorado. But I mean, I grew up, you mentioned one time that you were influenced by Pete Seeger when you were a child, the great folk singer on the left, a former Marine, but a left-wing guy. He was actually on my sofa in my mom's house.
Oh, my gosh, I'm jealous.
Yeah, strumming the banjo. She was a single mom bringing up 3 children. Our father had died. And she was working in the concerts and lectures department at what is now Minnesota State University. And he was there to do a concert. Well, she got to pick him up at the airport, and he agreed to come see her home and hang around for a while and visit the night before the concert.
That's similar to the way I got to meet the late Peter Yarrow, who just passed away. The Puff the Magic Dragon. So I was in the early 2000s, probably 2001, 2002. I was the person who picked him up at the airport, toted his guitar around. So I was like the volunteer roadie for whatever he was doing in Colorado a quarter century ago. And I kept up with Peter. He just passed away this last year, tragically.
I heard that. That's one of my favorite songs, by the way. The kids make fun of me when they're playing their music. I say, put on Puff the Magic Dragon. It's quite a difference from System of the Down or some of the stuff they listen to.
I'm with you, Wayne. I'm with you.
But anyway, I was thinking about that before you came in because just the other night I watched the new Bob Dylan movie. I guess it's not that new right now, but it's new to me.
We saw that too. Isn't that great? I'd recommend that to your listeners. It's about that kind of original when folk was new, right? And what Dylan did to folk, but it also covered Pete Seeger. It covered the other kind of folk movement. The Newport Festival, was it?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, amazing.
And it was, Bob Dylan was great, but this movie features heavily Pete Seeger as an influence over him. So, well, listen, let's begin by talking about some issues right off the bat.
I thought we were just talking folk music the whole 40 minutes.
We could do that.
Okay, let's go into some issues. What the heck?
The governor's got a busy day ahead of him. This morning he announced that he's giving $10 million to food banks because with the Democrat government shutdown.
Oh, you mean the Republican government shutdown?
The Democratic government.
The Republican government shutdown. Is that the one you're talking about? Let me ask you, who controls the federal government? Both branches of Congress and the presidency. Just one word. Which party?
Well, the Democrats are the ones blocking.
I wish it was the Democrats.
It's the Democratic Party that won't pass the bill. The Democrats are out
right now, man. We do not have the House. We do not have the Senate. We do not have the presidency. Anyway,
okay, let's rephrase that.
Let's move past that. The government shutdown.
So the Schumer shutdown has made it hard that SNAP cards are not being loaded. And that's very difficult on people who rely on that for food. So what have you done about it?
Yeah, so this is, and some of your listeners might think of this as food stamps because it used to be stamps. It's now basically, it's a credit card people get, SNAP cards. So these are working people. They're working. They're earning very low wages. They get supplemental nutritional assistance. So it's loaded on their SNAP card. Basically use it to buy your groceries. You can't buy liquor with it. You can't buy cigarettes with it. You buy groceries with it. Because of the government shutdown, those cards will not be loaded November 1st with any resources. So basically a lot of hardworking Colorado families, in fact, 600,000 of them, and of those 600,000, half are children, by the way. So over 300,000 children won't have any money to buy groceries. So we are going to, as a state, shift about $10 million to food banks and food pantries to help make up for that. We can't fully make up for it. There's $120 million that was coming to folks to buy groceries. But we're going to shift $10 million to really beef up the amount of food, put in large purchase orders so that people are able to at least not go hungry. That's our goal. And then we, of course, hope the federal government reopens again soon.
Okay, very good. Yeah, as one who did have a single mother when I was young, she remarried later. I like to think of all public policy through the lens of a single parent, maybe living in a mobile home park, struggling with 2 or 3 jobs just and still cannot make the rent and keep the lights on and feed the children. So I think that's why I'm a conservative. It's probably why you're a liberal.
That's right. I mean, the money, you're working, maybe you're earning $18, $20 an hour. It's going to rent. It's going to your car. This is the money you needed for groceries, and you don't have that room in your budget. You don't have savings. Where's it going to come from? I'm visiting Care and Share Food Bank right here in Colorado Springs right after this, and we are moving the money quickly. And by the way, your listeners can also help at feedingcolorado.org/donate, feedingcolorado.org/donate, whether it's $5, $500, hungry Colorado families need your help.
Yeah, please donate, because some of us who don't have a hard time feeding our families forget what that's like, how scary it is, how awful it is, and how hard it is on the children. So please donate generously. Governor, this morning I also saw on your website you announced that we are leading the nation in electric vehicle sales. But we are also, I think we subsidize electric vehicle sales double what the next state does, double what any other state subsidizes.
Do you drive an EV yet?
No.
What's your next car going to be?
Well, I don't know. I've thought about a Cybertruck because a Cybertruck can power your entire house during a blizzard or something.
Oh, come on. You just wanted to own the libs. You can be honest.
Well, there's that too, yes.
So, yes, we do have the highest percentage of electric vehicle sales in the country. About a third of our vehicle sales are electric. That was, I think, for the third quarter of the calendar year. I actually think it'll come down a little bit because this was the expiring federal tax credits, right? So I think it'll come down to maybe a quarter or 20% for the fourth quarter. What a lot of people did is because there were federal tax credits expiring, they accelerated their decision to buy. They're like, I was probably going to buy in January, but now I'm going to buy, in September because I get another, I think it was $5,000 off. It made a lot of sense. So, but yeah, I don't think it's a shock that Coloradans are kind of ahead of the curve. We're very tech savvy. We are kind of ahead of the curve in where we are with charging infrastructure as well, fast charging infrastructure. Electricity is less expensive than it is in other parts of the country. We're like 15, 20% below the national average. So there's a number of reasons that, I'm sure led into that.
I mean, there's a case to be made that, poor people who are driving around in 10, 20-year-old cars are helping pay for the cars purchased by wealthier people who can afford to buy an electric car and therefore take care of it.
I don't quite get that. How are they? Because they're not.
The subsidy. Subsidy.
Yeah, we have. I mean, many states have this. We have a tax credit around affordability, but it is high. You get more off from the lower cost electric vehicles. I wish I had the dollar number in front of me, but I think it's like if the EVs that are under 30-some thousand actually have a bigger rebate than the Teslas and others. And we're looking at reconfiguring that to do that even more because we really value those entry level vehicles. I mean, again, I want to save people money on any kind of vehicle, of course. But yes, you're right. It's those and used EVs as well, by the way, which also have qualified for different credits. 3-4 years old, somebody's upgrading to another one. That those cars have like internal combustion engine cars that last 10 to 20 years.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on. I'd like to talk about the state income tax. There is a movement afoot. I guess the title board yesterday or the day before got rid of a ballot measure, a proposed ballot measure that would have created a progressive income tax in Colorado. It's going to come back. They're going to get it. It was a single subject rule. They'll make it a single subject, and they'll get it right, and it'll come back, and it's going to go on the ballot probably if they can get enough signatures. But you, and this is kind of surprising as a liberal Democrat, you have often said you'd like the state income tax to be zero. We could better compete with states like Texas and Florida, where, in other states, Wyoming, right next door, where the income tax is zero. Tell me about your position on this proposal to raise the income tax and what you might do to fight it and what you might do to zero out our income tax while you're still in office.
Yeah, I'm against anything that raises the income tax, and this would have done that. It would have, I think, increased government by over several $1 billion, is my understanding. I don't know if it's no longer happening or not, but it was not something that I was supportive of. We get our state revenue, and most states do. There's really three different major sources of revenue, Wayne. Sales tax, and the state one is 2.9%. Anything else you're paying is local, but the state one is 2.9%, and it varies where you are based on the local. Property tax. And Colorado, while we like to complain about it, we actually, as you may know, we have one of the lowest property taxes in the country, way lower than Texas, way lower than Texas and Florida. Yeah.
For years, it was very, very, very low. It's come up in recent years because the property values have shot up so high.
That's right. And then that's happened. But again, as a percentage, it's very low, and in absolute terms, compared to both Texas and Florida, so we're much lower. But yeah, if your home goes from $400,000 to $800,000, of course, it goes up. So again, sales tax, property tax, and income tax is that third one. And we're pretty well divided between the three. Of those, I'm the least biggest fan of the income tax. I would like to abolish that. And when I say abolish that, first of all, I'm talking about revenue neutrality. So I'm separating this from the discussion, do we make government bigger? Do we make government smaller? We're not talking about that. We're saying for the current level of government, how do you best finance it? Separately, again, if you can make it smaller, you can cut all those taxes. If it's bigger, they're all higher. I am not a fan of the income tax as one of those three mechanisms that pays in. So what am I a fan of? I don't particularly want to raise the sales tax. I certainly don't want to raise property taxes. What I would put forward as some kind of alternative to that would be, again, trying to tax something that we don't want, that we want less of. So some sort of carbon or pollution tax. In the past, I've supported, I'm not suggesting this again because we already do this, for instance, tobacco, alcohol, those sorts of things. So in general, power taxes, power to destroy, that was, Supreme Court, early Supreme Court decision. Generally tax what you don't want and don't tax what you want. Profits we want. Profits are wonderful. Income's wonderful. For companies, for individuals, make more. That's the best thing. Find something that is a negative thing to tax rather than a positive thing.
So will you fight it if this thing manages to get on the ballot? Will you fight against it?
Well, I don't know, again, what this thing is, but I'm certainly been opposed to any increases in the income tax.
That's what this would be.
Yeah, I'm opposed to that. Yeah. I've supported 3 decreases in my time, successful. 2, in my time as governor, when I came in, the income tax rate was 4.63%. I supported at the ballot box lowering it to 4.5%.
Yeah.
Then at the ballot box, we lowered it to 4.4%. And then through the legislature, we lowered it to 4.25% with an asterisk. That asterisk means you have to have a surplus for it to go that low, which this year we don't have. We can talk about why, but H.R. 1 changed the tax code. There's actually was a deficit. We filled that up. But when there's a surplus again, that the income tax rate will go back from 4.4 back to 4.25%.
Okay, great. Tariffs. How do you feel about President Trump's tariff?
Tariffs are awful. So I hope you agree with me on this, Wayne. I think tariffs are terrible. I rate them even lower than income tax, frankly. They're really low down there. I mean, first of all, if you want to tax consumption, you do a broad-based sales tax. I'm not philosophically against sales taxes. 2.9 is fine. I'm not saying we want to raise it, but we're fine with it. Tariffs are a subsection of that, but they're much more pernicious. They are much worse. Why? Because they hurt competitiveness. I've heard from so many companies in Colorado, manufacturing companies, that say we have to move manufacturing overseas because we can't pay tariffs on the parts and materials we need to assemble the products and build the products here. We export to a global market. The reciprocal tariffs are hitting us. So I've heard from dozens of these folks that are looking at either delaying or moving manufacturing overseas strictly because of the tariffs and the uncertainty around them.
I have always been against tariffs. It's a tax. However, just to play devil's advocate for a moment, I mean, this country got rid of slavery a long time ago, but we trade in, we buy all sorts of goods made by slaves in China. And so you could make an argument that we should tax anyone who's using slave labor, pennies, 50 cents an hour jobs, that we ought to tax them because in this country, we have all sorts of OSHA protections that raise wages. We have minimum wage laws. How do we compete if we don't impose tariffs on those that cheat, that do awful things to produce goods at a cheap price?
Yeah, absolutely right. I am morally against slavery, involuntary servitude. I'm glad you are as well. We should not have any business in any goods that are manufactured by people forcibly. In addition, what you do with trade agreements, and these are policies pursued President Bush, President Obama, you build labor standards in to trade agreements. Now, not necessarily our labor standards with OSHA and 40-hour work week. It might be a 60-hour work week. It might be a much lower minimum wage, depending on the country. But absolutely, no slavery. Absolutely, you got to have reasonable working conditions where people aren't being killed at the workplace. So you build those labor conditions into trade agreements. That's what this country has done, and absolutely we should do. If that's what President Trump was doing, I would support that direction.
Okay. Also, you could argue that he's using it as a bargaining chip. You're over tariffing us, so we're going to tariff you, and we're going to hopefully bring tariffs down to zero.
That would be nice. That's what sort of the optimists have hoped that he's doing, but there doesn't seem to be a rhyme or reason for him. There are plenty of countries that did not tariff our items. Then he put tariffs on them, and then they added tariffs because there's reciprocal to us. So, yes, in a targeted negotiation, you can do that with a country or several countries, but that is not what he's doing. He's doing across-the-board tariff increases regardless of what they do.
Okay. I spoke with your good friend, my mentor of many, many years. I grew up, I think I became a conservative, I think much to my mother's chagrin at the time, when Reagan took office. And I just saw what he was getting done. One of his chief architects of his economic policies, of his economic revolution, was your very good friend and my mentor, Dr. Art Laffer. I spoke with him a year or two ago, and he thinks the world of you. I mean, he thinks you hung the moon. He thinks you should be president of the United States. And this is Reagan's economic architect. Tell me a little about your relationship with Dr. Art Laffer.
Well, he was, by the way, we just recently, I don't know if this is when you saw him, but we had him here in Colorado Springs, I'm thinking 2 or 3 months ago for the
correct.
National Governors Association.
Yeah, I didn't see him then, but I knew he was here.
Yeah, and that's online. So if you Google Arthur Laffer National Governors Association, I moderated a discussion with him and one of President Obama's top economists. So to 2 top economists, it was a very good discussion. You can listen to that. Actually, he is where as my first job was with him. So when I was 13 or 14 years old, I interned with him and learned a lot about economics. And we also then worked together in the private sector. He was on the board of one of the companies that I founded, proflowers.com at the time, which is several years after that.
You sort of grew up with him then, didn't you?
He's great. Yeah, we're very close to him. He lives in Tennessee now, and know his kids too. And he's somebody that I certainly always call and talk to. And he's obviously, again, whether people disagree or agree with his political opinions, he's certainly one of the top world living economists right now. I mean, he is renowned. And for those listening, he's done a lot of work, but his most famous work, and the one that he became known for, famously drawn on the back of a napkin, the Laffer curve,
yes,
basically shows, and we'll explain this to your listeners, at a 0% tax rate, the government takes in how much revenue? 0, right? But what he said is at 100% tax rate, the government also takes in 0 because nobody is going to work only for the benefit of the government. People are going to work under the table, gray market, black market, et cetera. Yeah. So somewhere in between, there is a curve. So there's a number, let's say it's a 98% tax, where the government actually takes in the same revenue as like a 4% tax. Now, what the numbers are can be debated, but the principle is that that again, people work for their benefit. They obviously share some of that in the form of taxes, but the higher taxes are, the less people are going to work and earn above board. It doesn't necessarily affect what they do below board or black market.
And that may be one of the reasons you've come out against the income tax.
Yeah, by the way, that's also the problem with too high a sales tax. So, like, I'm not, some people nationally, you might have heard this, they want to replace the income tax with a really high sales tax.
Right.
I'm not a huge fan of that, even though I hate the income tax. They're talking like a 25% sales tax. At that level, you're going to have stuff sold out of the, white trucks and people opening their trench coats and selling you razors. I mean, it's simply too high. And it encourages cheating at a 25% sales tax rate. You don't get that at a 5 or 10% sales tax rate, but I think you do at 25, especially when states add, 7, 8. You're talking 35%. You're going to create a black market. So that's a separate aside. And I'm open to the vague concept, but I'm just very worried about, kind of these economics playing in of where people are selling things on the underground market.
Okay. One of my children, Huey Laugesen, is the head of the Colorado State Shooting Association. Hate to say it, but he is suing you.
The head of it. Is he really?
Well,
That's
he's
wonderful.
He's the executive director. He's the executive director.
Good for him. That's great. Yeah.
So, and
why is he suing me?
Well, I'll tell you in a minute. Our children used to play together, at
how old is he now?
At birthday parties and such, Chuck E. Cheese. He is, how old is Huey? Huey is early 20s.
Yeah. You have so many kids you can't remember their ages.
I have 6 children. I can't remember
I can
their
remember
ages
mine.
Exactly.
Mine are 14 and 11 for the record.
So,
I remember it. Yeah.
Right. So he was there as one of the older kids. I've got younger kids who used to go to the birthday parties and such. But he's suing you over Senate Bill 25-003, Del Toro v. Polis. The law requires permits, training, testing to purchase certain semi-automatic firearms. Some argue this could disproportionately affect low-income residents. That's what we argued when I was writing about this a number of months ago when the legislature was in session, that you and I can probably afford to go through training and to pay for permits and to pay for testing. But the single parent in the mobile home park, working multiple jobs, try to make ends meet, probably cannot do that.
Yeah, and we absolutely should have scholarships. I do believe that if you want access to safe gun training, you should have access to that. I believe that. I'd support funding for that. I think there's the ability to do that within that law. And by the way, there's also the question, though, Wayne, if you're very low income, how you're able to afford an $800 or $900 gun, because these are the more expensive and advanced weaponry we're talking about here. But yes, the barrier should not be just the training side. I'm a fan of training. I think I believe in responsible gun ownership. I believe in the Second Amendment, our right to bear arms. And if what this bill did, for those who follow it. Oh, by the way, it started out, as you probably know, as a bill that I did not support. It started out as effectively a ban on certain weapons. You can call them semi-automatics, but the definition wasn't 100% semi-automatics. It was basically the more advanced weaponry analogous to semi-automatics. Much of that the sale would have been prohibited going forward. If you had one, you could keep it, no impact, but you couldn't buy one at the store. I think there were provisions that allowed for resale, but it was hard. I was not for that. What I am for is, of course, if you want to operate advanced weaponry, you should have the training, and it's a day worth of training roughly. And yes, there's a cost to it, and you pay that. We don't know the cost yet, but call it $100. Could be more, could be less. And yes, there should be scholarships for low income.
Okay. Will you push for that? Will you try to establish these scholarships?
It was even in my signing letter. I'll have to go back and look at it. But this is administered by, if I recall, Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And yes, I hope that they have some kind of way that they can support that for lower income folks. Okay,
great. Because a lot of times lower income folks are the ones most in need of, the personal protection weapons that whatever they deem appropriate.
They are. Again, this is covering, generally speaking, more of the advanced, more expensive weaponry. It would not necessarily cover you would not need training, for instance, to buy more simple and low-cost weaponry. But yeah, I mean, there are, for instance, used advanced weaponry and guns that are semi-automatic that you might be able to find in the secondary market for $100 or something. So yeah, the more people are trained, the better. I mean, responsible gun ownership. Again, I may think you have. Some people don't think you should have to do it, but I think everybody thinks it's a good thing to be trained if you're going to want to own a gun on basic gun safety.
Correct. Yeah, I think that's a good point. The lawsuit, by the way, is not personal. This is just a Second Amendment lawsuit. That's the kind of thing they file all the time. So. But that's they're making a Second Amendment case against this law.
Yeah,
So-
the state is several of those. We've for instance, one thing we did. I mean, whenever you pass laws around gun ownership, you generally have lawsuits. So we had, when I came in, there was basically you had to be 18 to buy a pistol, but it was 18 to buy certain kinds of guns and 21 to buy other kinds of guns. I don't remember which was which, but you had to. The age of that you were when you bought a gun was different depending on the kind of gun. We made it across the board 21. So, and that was already the age, I believe, for pistols was already 21, but certain shotguns and others were 18. So again, your parents can buy it, they can share it with you. You go hunting, it doesn't affect any of that. It's just you go into a store, you're 19, just like alcohol. You now have to be 21 to be able to yourself buy a gun.
And the Second Amendment says,
and that was found legal by the court, by the way.
Right, and the Second Amendment says the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. However, the courts have carved out some infringement that it will tolerate.
Well, I think a given in that and many other protections so that you're an adult making your own decisions. And that age of adulthood sort of it ranges in our country from 18 where you get some rights. I guess you could even say 16, you can drive. But then certainly 21 are some of those. I mean, so they're kind of – there's not like one date that everybody agrees on that's the date that you have all those rights.
No, that's true. And I sent you something this morning. A new report came out from a foundation here in Colorado. Common Sense Institute, I believe it was. While arrests have decreased about 40% over the past decade, violent crime has increased by 55%. And I want to say here that the analysis noted that the legislatures reversed some of those laws, mentioning 2023 Senate Bill 097, which made vehicle theft a felony regardless of a car's value. Lawmakers passed the law at the urging of Governor Jared Polis. So you have cracked down on, we were the number 2 or number 1 state, I think, at one point for car theft. And you cracked down on that.
We've actually seen major decreases in car theft with the increased penalties. It was more than that. So the increased penalties were very helpful. What we did there was basically it was already a felony if you stole a car more than, I think it was $2,000. We said even if it's a $1,000 car, $1,500 car, it's still a felony. So the value of the car doesn't matter. Stealing the theft is a felony. That helped. The other thing we did that helped is we actually sent money to prosecutors to prosecute auto theft, because what many prosecutors, remember that you elect our DA in each county in Colorado. Your listeners outside the state might not know that, but we elect our DAs in each county. They control their budgets. Every single DA doesn't have the resources to prosecute every crime they want to prosecute. So part of what you're electing when you elect a DA is their judgment in how they want to allocate their resources to prosecute crime. It's not that they don't want to; they just don't have enough lawyers to prosecute everything. So what we said is, we're going to send extra money out to DAs that you can focus a half person or person on prosecuting auto theft, because this is becoming such a big statewide issue, and that also helped quite a bit in prosecuting people who were stealing cars.
What about the increase in violent crime? The legislature's been on a 10-year spree to do what's called criminal justice reform. And it seems like some of that's backfired on the residents of the state.
I think you need to look at, again, the statistics, and I'm sure Common Sense Institute, if they don't mysteriously end their report, in 23 or 24, you'll see that the last 2 years, there's been substantial decreases in violent crime. So in 23 and 24, we've had double-digit increases in violent crime. We are on track for another double-digit decrease here in 2025.
What do you attribute that to?
Oh, gosh. It's really hard when it comes to crime. First of all, we're better funding law enforcement. Okay, so this is something, and we identified this problem. I mean, I've been talking about this problem for years, right? So when I ran for re-election, you might recall, that was 2022. I said one of my goals is making Colorado one of the safest states. We have a plan to do that over 5 years. And part of that was investing in law enforcement. So yes, the state has helped stabilize local law enforcement agencies, helping them retain and hire people. The voters now have passed an initiative that sends money to local law enforcement. It's an area that, if you look back 5 or 10 years, Wayne, the state didn't really support local law enforcement. It was all the local tax base. And we have now said we all need to work on crime. Let's get the state involved with actually helping to do that. And it's a small part of the budget. Most of the budget is still local, but I'm sure our local police and sheriffs do appreciate any resources they get from the state. Okay.
Affordable housing and zoning. When I was an editor in Boulder, I used to rail against Boulder. Boulder had some of the most exclusive zoning and regulations, housing regulations in the state or in the country even. this was all about the environment and everything, and it was sort of anti-density. And yet it talked, people there generally valued diversity. They talked about it a lot, but this was sort of anti-diversity. Now I see that you are imposing on localities. You're trying to eliminate some of those kinds of restrictions that Boulder was famous for.
Yeah, I think, and the framing is not right. We're not imposing anything. We are trying to prevent government from imposing requirements on homeowners and property owners, right? Let's say you're a property owner. You own your house, right? It is not the government's authority to tell you what you do with that house. Imagine if the government was telling you what bed to buy, what dishwasher to have, right? It is your right. It is your land. We get that, there are things that are, neighborhood issues like height limits. We're not doing anything against height limits. If a neighborhood, a city wants to say it's 3 stories, that's it. Totally fine with that. But beyond that, your government is infringing on your rights if they say you can't add another wing to your house on your property, you can't add an accessory dwelling unit, you can't rent out part of your house to somebody else. These are not decisions for any level of government to make. They're decisions for individual property owners to make.
And the people who oppose you on that, I certainly get your argument on that. People who oppose you say, well, you're imposing on local control.
Yeah, we are trying to prevent government at any level from overreaching. I think government is government. Local, state, federal,
Sure.
They all overreach. It doesn't matter. Maybe you're even more annoyed if the federal government overreaches, but I'm just as annoyed if my mayor or city council overreach, right? They all can overreach. So how do we better protect property owners and say on your property, you can do what you want to do? Now, again, if it truly affects your neighbors, we're not saying run a store with traffic coming in a residential area, but if you're running a home business and you're not having people come to and from your home business like you are here, your city should not be able to shut you down. I hope Colorado Springs isn't listening. You might be running a home business here. This is a studio in your home. But that is not the city's business, right? Like what you do on your own property.
Sure. And this is Monument, and we're in what used to be an ADU, and they don't have any problem with that.
Good. So, that's wonderful.
Just outside of Colorado
historically,
Springs.
Some cities have they've said that people can't they run home businesses. And you know what winds up happening is, of course, people do it anyway because nobody really knows, but then they're technically running afoul of their mortgage covenant, their insurance. They're causing all sorts of risk for themselves because what they're doing is somewhat extra legal because of an onerous local government that infringes on their rights.
Okay. You ever hear a story that makes you sit up and think, if he can do it, why not me? Scott Riopel built his life from scratch. No handouts, just hustle. Now he runs Interstate Roofing, part of the One Solutions family, and he's showing others the path out. If you're ready to change your life, follow him on Facebook and Instagram at big_Scott303. This isn't just roofing, this is a way up. At Integrity Bank and Trust, integrity is more than a name. It's a way of doing business. My family does business there, and I can tell you they are the friendliest and easiest we have worked with over decades as entrepreneurs and small business owners. Integrity's expert and friendly personnel offer home loans, treasury management, personal banking, and other services for every stage of life. Integrity puts customers first, living up to its name. Let's move on to healthcare. You started the Office on Saving People Money on Healthcare. Healthcare has continued to skyrocket everywhere, and including in this state. Now you're facing Medicaid cuts in Colorado, just like the rest of the country that did Medicaid expansion. My thinking on healthcare has always been that it's a supply-demand issue. Medicaid expansion is a perfect example of simply changing. It's sort of like we're going to determine who gets what and who pays what, but we're not doing anything to expand actual health care. So you put more dependence on the system because you tell more people they're actually covered with Medicaid. Medicaid doesn't work very well for a lot of people because they can't get in to see anyone. And the emergency rooms are just absolutely a nightmare these days. You wait 4 or 5 hours, even if you're having a real emergency sometimes.
Healthcare is a very we could easily spend 40 minutes or more, a lot more, talking about healthcare.
Yeah.
So it's hard to do it justice in 3-4 minutes because I know you want to talk about a lot of topics. But here's the challenge with healthcare, right? We have federal laws on the books that if somebody is dying and they're, go to a hospital, they have to be treated and stabilized, right? So that could be tens of thousands of dollars of treatment with no payer, right?
And if they're indigent, they'll never pay for it.
Right. No, they're right. Not going to pay for it, right? They're zero. Let's say they're uninsured, indigent, there's zero payment. So when there are people that are uninsured, it basically leads to cost shifting onto everybody else because the hospital, they can't do all the charity care for everybody and not get paid. They basically have to charge their paying customers more. I mean, that's just the realities of running a business, whether they're nonprofit or for-profit, they're a business. So that's one of the things that make it so challenging. It's not like people that are uninsured don't get health care. When people are uninsured show up, they force other people to pay for health care. And often it winds up costing substantially more because what they didn't have access to was the preventative care that would have been much less expensive and prevented them from having to show up in an emergency room needing a urgent procedure, right? Like maybe they just needed statins to keep their blood pressure low. You might be on them. You have friends that are, right?
Sure.
Right. But if they didn't have that, boom, they got a heart attack. They're in the ward. They need heart surgery. It's $200,000 and nobody pays for it. It gets shifted onto other people. So that's the kind of dimensions of the challenge we face. It's not that people who don't have healthcare insurance don't get it. They get healthcare, but they're forcing other people to pay.
We are opening a new medical school at the University of Northern Colorado.
We are. It's very exciting.
I think that's what we need more of.
Yeah,
We need to generate more nurses, doctors, NPs, PAs, more supply of healthcare. So it's not just rationed.
That's right. And part of that, and we've really worked hard on enlarging it, is what we call scope of care. So nurse practitioners should be able to do everything they're trained to do legally. You should have nurses able to administer care. We've now gotten pharmacists can do some prescriptions. So when people are trained for something, it all shouldn't have to funnel through the doctor, right? For things that need a doctor, you need a doctor. But we should be able to administer care at many different levels, less expensively, with greater supply.
Yeah. And this new medical school will churn out osteopathic physicians, and I think that's great. But more of that, I think, is really the solution because otherwise it is just a redistribution shell game of who's going to pay for what.
That's right. And it was lost somewhat in the announcement because of the glamour of the medical school at UNC, which we love. But we also, with that same capital investment, are doing healthcare workers that are nurses and nurse practitioners and nurse assistants at Metro in Denver and also at Trinidad State. So
sure.
We're investing across the state in this.
I know a lot of, Pikes Peak State College, when it was a community college, was able to give 4-year nursing degrees, and I think that was a very good move in the right direction, and that's what we need.
Absolutely, they can. We've gotten our community colleges into the kind of the 4-year degree business as well.
So one thing you and I disagree on vehemently. You are pro-choice on abortion. I think that this sort of mass slaughter of innocent unborn children. I'm not talking about tubal ligation, pregnancies, or anything like that. I'm talking about the abortion clinics, such as the old Boulder abortion clinic in your hometown, that you just go in and pay for a convenience abortion. Colorado subsidizes abortions quite a bit now. Even the ride to an abortion clinic is subsidized. So we've spoken about this in the past. When you don't have an abortion and a woman a couple takes a pregnancy or a single woman, whatever the case may be, to fruition, that costs thousands and thousands of dollars out of pocket generally, even for someone who's insured. I know that my children are insured, and when they have children, they have to come up with a lot of out-of-pocket money. And we've talked about this, but would you support legislation to help subsidize actual live births of healthy babies?
So, yeah, I think these are the right discussions to have. I really think that, when pro-choice and anti-choice people are talking, they're never really going to change each other's minds. But we should focus on things that we
pro-choice and pro-life.
Or whatever, whatever what I mean.
Yes.
But they're not going to change their mind on that. What I think we should focus on is like what you're talking about. How do you reduce the number of women that are in that situation where they feel like they have to make a horrific choice? Certainly economics is part of that. So, I mean, it's not the whole thing, but it's one of the things. So if you can and I would broaden it, Wayne. I mean, for instance, the work we've done around universal free preschool, I hope that helps a woman be confident they can have the child. But absolutely out-of-pocket costs around childbirth and child care, right? I mean, again, you don't want to say, oh my gosh, if I have this child, I will have to quit my job, and then I have no means to pay my rent, or because I don't earn enough to pay for childcare. I mean, that's a situation that people are facing. Maybe they can choose to put the child up for adoption. That's also a very difficult choice for a mother.
Right.
So the easier we can make it to make the choice to, yes, you can have this child and you can lead your life, the better. Preschool, childcare, no out-of-pocket costs for birth. I'm very supportive of all those.
Well, good. My brother's a lawyer in Kansas City, and he has a major client, which is a Catholic monastery, and they have just purchased what used to be an old youth mental hospital, and it's all about supporting women with difficult pregnancies, women who are scared about how they're going to pay for the child, clothe, feed, shelter the child. And they're really doing a good job taking care of that. So I agree with you. On the pro-life side, we need a whole lot more of that.
I think it's a great way to engage people who look, I mean, because at the end of the day, Wayne, you live in a state where the pro-life side is maybe 30% of the state or something like that. So if you want to make progress on the issue, these are the kinds of discussions you have to have. Like, how can we make sure a woman has the confidence they need to have the child, knowing they won't be destitute because of that decision?
Yes. Trump in the Middle East. Do you credit Trump for the Middle East peace deal?
I did a post on that when it happened, and I said I thank Qatar, Egypt, President Trump, and the responsible negotiators on the Israeli side and the Palestinian side. I mean, absolutely. I was appreciative that President Trump helped to convene that along with Qatar and Egypt, and I'm thrilled they got the hostages released, 20 living people released, and of course remains of others, which is important to the families so they can have proper burials. You
are Jewish, I believe, of Jewish lineage at least, correct? I don't know if you're a
I'm Jewish,
practicing Jew.
Absolutely.
Okay, and how do you feel about all of these left-wing campus protests that are so viciously anti-Israel?
Well, I'm more scared by the right-wing neo-Nazis. You saw that there were some young Republicans that had Nazi texts going back and forth, and I think there was a Trump appointee who thankfully withdrew himself because he had Nazi ties. But look, I mean, it's not a left-right. Of course, there's people on both sides that I'm sure are bigoted and hateful, just like the vast majority of Republicans and Democrats are very, very embracing of everybody, regardless of their faith or their background.
Sure, but academe and the faculties and the students throughout academe, they've been very loud and very active on this issue. Well, very anti-Israel.
Well, you can't. I mean, again, I don't generalize. I mean, there's. I'm sure there were. Well, first of all, Colorado has not had those kinds of extremely disruptive protests that occurred elsewhere. We did, in a brief time, have people that camped on the lawn in Denver at Auraria. I think within a week or two, it was dispersed, but it was nothing near the size of some of these other things. It was, I think, only a couple dozen people. So we, of course, want to enforce anti-squatting rules. I mean, you can't just set up a tent somewhere. That's not free speech. But of course, I believe in free speech. I mean, if you want to demonstrate, you go do that as long as you're not, illegally obstructing something or violating some law.
While you talk about squatting, do you have a moment? I know you got to go, but do you have a moment to talk a little bit about immigration? We've seen 40,000+ illegal immigrants, a lot of them from Venezuela, a lot of them Maduro kicked out of his country because they were criminals. He didn't want them there, coming into Denver. It's caused a lot of problems for Mayor Mike Johnston, cost a lot of money to residents of Denver. How do you feel about that? I know that you had called during the Trump administration for better border security. Now, I mean, during the Biden administration for better border security. Now we have it under Trump. But we are a sanctuary state. Is that hurting us?
We disagree on that. We're not. We work with the federal government every day on going after criminals. In fact, I had an interview earlier today. I get sued on this a lot too by folks who think we shouldn't be giving this information or that information to our federal law enforcement partners. But it is true we don't co-op state resources to engage in federal civil investigations. We're happy to work with the federal government on any criminal matter. I would say, look, yes, I was critical of the Biden administration for not securing the border. What I'm critical of the Trump administration on is deporting many of the wrong people that have been working here for years or decades, are an important part of our society. They should be working on getting provisional working permits to people that we need, that are critical. Maybe they're working in construction, ag workers, they're part of our communities. They make our country better and stronger by their presence, and we should find a legal way to do that.
Sure, and get the criminals out. Get the criminals
absolutely.
out. Yeah.
If you violate our laws, you of course should pay the price. And if that includes deportation, includes incarceration, absolutely.
Very good. Well, listen, you're about out of time. I know you've got to go. Is there anything else you'd like to address before we finish up here?
Well, I'm off to the Care and Share Food Bank. Again, to highlight, I would encourage your listeners to go to feedingcolorado.org/donate, just to help people get through a very tough time through the holidays. If you can afford $5, $50, please do that, and appreciate the disagree better, Wayne. I think it's
Absolutely.
a great way to have these conversations. I hope you have more people of many different persuasions on here. I mean, not just me. You should have libertarians, socialists. I mean, have all those folks come, debate with you and discuss why they believe what they believe, right?
Exactly. That's what this show is all about. We want to get all sorts of different voices on here and just have a nice discussion.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Wayne, for having me.
Well, thanks. You've helped move us in that direction very much today, so I appreciate it.
Have a good day.
You too.